Hi everybody, and welcome to section 9.1, which is very exciting. This is our last chapter, so jazz hands, get excited. You're almost done. And we're going to go through square roots. So let's get started. First of all, let's define what is the square of a number. So if you have, let's say for instance, let's take 1 squared. What is that? 1. 2 squared is 4. 3 squared is 9. So these numbers are called the squares of, so like 9 is called the square of 3. 4 is called, you would say something like 4 is the square of 2. Okay. And if you already know this, I'm sorry, but this is just, we have to make sure we have our terminology straight. Now, if the action of getting you from here to here is squaring, then the action to go from here to here is taking the square root. So what does that mean? So the square root is that if you have 3 squared is equal to 9, you have a number squared that's equal to 9, then this number here, not including the exponent, this number is called the square root. So we would say that 3 is the square root of 9. And it makes sense if you really think about it, because if 9 is the square of 3, then 3 is that square root. So because 3 times itself, it will give you 9. So let's talk a little bit more about notation. So square root notation looks like this. This is called the radical. It's a radical sign, not like radical dude. It's radical. This is called the radical sign. And inside the radical is called the radicand. We don't really use the word radicand that much. We just say the square root of. I've heard some people call this the little house, which is kind of funny. But I usually, if I say radical, then that's, you'll know what I'm talking about. So if you have here a square root of m, so say here, this symbol, we would read it as the square root of m. So basically, this is the rule. So if you have a number, let's say 9 is 3 squared, okay? Then if I was to take the square root of 9 is equal to 3. Okay, this is the symbol that's saying I'm taking the square root of this, okay? And when we get into rational exponents, I can explain even further and show to you another way. But essentially, because this is a square root, when you have something that's raised to the power 2, these cancel out and you're left with the actual square root. Okay, so it's the positive number that the square of it is what's inside the radicand. Okay, so let's that's something to think about, and let's go through and talk about perfect squares. We know that the perfect squares are 1, 9, 16, 25, 36, because this is square root of, so 1 squared is a perfect square, right? 2 squared is a perfect square. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. And you get the idea, right? That's a perfect square. So, of course, if you square root a perfect square, you'll get back to where you started. So, square root of 1 will give you 1. Square root of 4 will give you 2, right? So, like, square root of 9. 9 is 3 squared, so the root is 3. Square root of 16, since that's 4 squared, this would be 4. See what I mean? Square root of 25 would be 5, 6. These are all perfect squares, right? 8, square root of 64 is 8 because 8 times 8 is 64. Square root of 81 is equal to 9. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of 121, 11. Square root of 144 is 12. And this would be square root of 169 is 13. And 14, and then finally 15. So let's go ahead and take the square root of a few numbers here. So I have here square root of 36 is 6. Square root, so that's for A. Square root of 196 is 14. That's B. So this is 14 right here. Negative square root of 81 is just going to be negative 9. The negative is outside. And then square root of 289, well, if you're up with your perfect squares, what is 289? 289 is 17 squared. So then that would be negative 17. Okay, so then if you have a negative number that you, so for right now, taking the square root of a negative is not allowed, or it's not real. So that's because what number can you think of that's positive that's going to give you a negative number? Can you think of any? Currently, where we are in our point, at this point in time, you haven't been introduced to any, right? Because that doesn't make sense, right? A negative times a negative is a positive times a positive is a negative. So you only get a negative number right now with where we are in our math class, in our math learning journey. We know that a positive and a negative number equals a negative times a positive, right? So in this case, this is either you could say not real or no solution right now. No real solution. Because right now we're only working with real numbers, right? So what does that mean? That sounds a little, and that just means that there will be a number that we could use here, but we're going to introduce that later on. So this is square root of 64. So that's negative 8. And then here we have square root of 25 plus square root of 144. So square root of 25 plus square root of 144, that would be 5 plus 12. So your answer is just 17. Okay, and then for B, you have the square root of, so notice this is different, okay? This is separate, sorry, wrong thing. These two are separated by this positive, right? But here, it's all underneath the radical, so you would have to do that first. So you would have to take the square root of 25 plus 144 is 169, and that's just going to be 13 from our chart, okay? All right, let's do a few more. We have here, let's see what else we have. Oh, okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is actually variable expressions with square roots. So what do we have to find the square root of an expression with a variable, right? Well, let's think about 9x squared. So what number, or, number in a formula, or number in a variable, multiplied by itself would give you 9x squared. So let's think about that for a second. What would that be? Okay, so if you said 3x, then you're correct, right? What about square roots of higher powers of variables? What would that be? So let's say you have if we square a to the m, you have here, look, we have to separate it by 2. So another way to think about it is, if you take the square root of some number raised to an even power, or any power really, the answer would be, you just divide this by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is just going to be to the power 5, because n to the power 5 times n to the power 5 will give us back n to the power 10, which is what we want, right? Or we could rewrite this as n5 squared, and then you take the square root, that undoes it, so then you get n to the power 5. Okay, okay, so how about 16r to the 20th power? Well, if you take the square root of it, square root of 16 is 4, and square root of r to the power 20 is 10. R to the power 10, sorry. So since we have that, we're going to do one more. Let's see, 196. Square root of 196, q to the 36th power is going to be 14, because 14 times itself is equal to 196. Q to the power 18, because q to the power 18 times itself will equal q to the 36th power. Okay. Right. Okay, so, okay, let's continue. Let's do a couple more. Let's see if we get this here. So square root of x to the 6. Okay, divide 6 by 2. What is that today? That's x cubed. So that's it. That's easy. Square root of y to the power 16, y to the power 8, right? Half of 16 is 8. That's the half. Taking half of something is the same as dividing by 2, but we already knew that. Square root of m to the power 4 is m squared. Square root of b to the power 10 is b to the 5th power. Okay, let's do another one. Square root of 16n squared, that would just be 4n, because 4n times itself would give you the 16n squared. Okay, this negative is on the outside. Fine, let's go ahead and bring him. What is the square root of 81c squared? You would get 9c. Okay, let's do a few more. So let's see, you can have multiple variables. It's totally fine. You just need to start getting comfortable with it. Don't be afraid of the radical, okay? Square root of 36 is 6 today. Square root of x squared, it's just x. Square root of y squared is y, and there you go. Square root of 64p to the power 64. So square root of 64 is going to be 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. P to the power 64, however, we just divide the exponent by 2. So that would be p to the 32nd power. Okay, one last one. We have here 121, a to the power 6, b to the power 8. So that's going to be 11, and then half of 6 is 3, so a to the power 3, b to the power 8. Square root of that is going to be 4, right? The 4th power, because it's half of 8. Okay, and that's it for section 9.1. Here's your homework. Good luck, happy studying, and then I will see you on the next video.